Foundation fellows and other GCC participants had a chance to visit the French Quarter. This was no ordinary visit. They wanted to know what folks thought about street harassment and ultimately garner the experience of how one's humanity is impacted by these public actions. One of the fellows quoted, "When I first heard of harassment, I immediately thought of sexual harassment, but what I learned on the streets were things that I haven't considered before, simply as asking for one's number or handing out flyers. It was really weird for me to be stopping people on the street as I did a study on harassment." Additionally, a group of Dillard University fellows participated in Take Back the Night, which is an international rally here in the U.S. And they partnered with 3 other universities and marched to rally against domestic violence and gender-based violence. So these are all of ways in which our fellows are participating in acts to defy street harassment and violence against women. So Emily May with Hollaback is going to show more ways in which we can address street harassment and other forms of gender-based violence. So please welcome to the stage Emily May.
All right, how are we doing tonight? Good. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here in New Orleans. So let's talk a little bit about street harassment. You guys ready? All right. Do you worry about getting attacked? Do you feel unsafe when you walk down the street? Are you worried about getting raped? Well, worry no more, ladies, because there are tons of anti-sexual assault products ready to help you not get raped. One simple solution right here, we have nail polish. That's right, my friends. Simply wear this fashionable nail polish and you can dip your fingers into every drink to check to see if it's been roofied. We also have here this anti-molestation jacket that delivers 110 volts, I kid you not, 110 volts of electricity when it, quote, detects unwanted advances. It comes in both denim and acrylic, so you cannot get raped in style. This one is really great and also a little more budget for those of you, on a budget. We have here hairy leg stockings, because women with hairy legs never get raped or assaulted. So what if you can't afford one of these anti-rape products? Well, here's some cheap and practical ways to avoid getting raped. One useful tactic is to keep your hair very, very short, like mine, and don't dress provocatively. You also shouldn't get drunk because it lowers inhibition, so don't drink any of that wine out there. You need to make sure you have an escort when you're out in public, preferably male, but if they have hairy legs, that will probably do too. Better yet, actually just play it safe and don't drink and don't go out. In fact, leaving the house is probably the best bet. So when this event is over, just go home and stay there, okay? We're gonna stay there because walking down the street puts you at risk. So, the most frustrating and infuriating part of these terrible products and advice is that they're all real, even this one. It was designed to prevent sexual assault. And the saddest part is the reason why they all exist. So when I was 18 years old, here's me as a baby, I moved from the suburbs of Richmond, Virginia to big old New York City. And I loved New York City, but there was one thing I didn't understand, especially being from the South, and those of you who are from Louisiana may get me here. I didn't understand why people didn't say hello to each other, or even good morning. Surrounded by so many people from so many places, how were we all going to get along if we couldn't at least say hello to each other? And then somebody said hello to me. Well, actually, he said, "Hello, baby." And so I said, "Hello." And he said, "I want to fuck the shit out of you." Yeah. So I was stunned, and naturally, what are you supposed to say? Like, "No, thank you, scary man." So I pretended that it didn't happen. And even though, to be real, it really shook me to my core, but it kept happening. And it happened again and again, 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a day. I would get a range of lewd sexual comments. "Hey, baby, I want to hit that." girl, I want to be your pony. So I ignored it, and I kept walking, and I pretended like it didn't hurt, and it wasn't scary, and I taught myself to be silent, because I thought if I really let it in and really let myself feel that hurt and fear from all those encounters, that it meant that I wasn't strong, and I really wanted to be a strong woman. So what happened, this catcalling, or what I now know to call street harassment, it slowly started to chip away at me. And I felt like if I wore what I wanted to wear and went where I wanted to go and, that it meant that somehow I was asking for it. And that with every degrading comment that I got, I felt more and more put in my place. I felt like a woman, and not in that cute new dress kind of way. So I kind of just resigned myself to the fact that as a woman, I had to fear harassment or worse on a daily basis. I had to avoid this street, or not wear this shirt, or buy one of these ridiculous products if I didn't want to go out and get myself raped. I had to adapt to the problem, not try and solve it. That this was just the cost of living in the city as a woman. So 5 years later, I'm still living in New York City, and I'm hanging out on a roof deck with some friends. Here they are. And we started to talk about street harassment. And my girlfriends were telling stories, and as they told story after story after story, I started to realize that we all kind of had the same experience. That like me, when they were harassed, they wouldn't say anything, and they felt weak. Or if they did say something and they yelled back at the guy, then things would escalate. The police, of course, didn't care. And as the guys heard these stories, they started to get pissed off too. And I'll never forget the moment where my friend Sam Carter, who's in the back left over there, looked me in the eye and he said, "Emily, you live in a different New York City than I do." And he was right. Sam and I grew up together, we went to college together, we lived in New York together, but Sam was never hissed at on his way to work. He never had strangers telling him he had great tits or a nice ass, and no one ever tried to rub up against him on a crowded train. Nope. Sam was a dude. And when he told me that I lived in a different New York City than him, I knew he was right. And it felt deeply unfair to both of us. So Sam and I, along with 5 of our friends, we resolved to change it. It was that same year in 2005 where this really amazing woman named Tal Nguyen entered the scene. She was riding the New York City subway when an older man sat down across from her, pulled out his penis, and started to masturbate. She took this picture of him doing it with her cell phone camera, which was a pretty new device in 2005, and she did it so that she could take it to the police and they could say, "Oh, ma'am, let me, do something to help you feel safe on the train." But the police did nothing. They didn't even file a report. So Tal, being the badass that she is, took that photo and she put it on Flickr. It made it all the way to the front cover of the New York Daily News. And there, it ignited a citywide conversation about public masturbation. It seemed like everyone had a story. They knew somebody that had a story. My boss at the time had seen that exact guy masturbating on the subway. And, so we thought, well, why don't we make a blog? And everybody can do what Tao did. We called it Hollaback, and we started to allow people to submit optional photos and stories of street harassment and their experiences in New York City. Almost immediately after launching, we were overwhelmed with people wanting to bring Hollaback to their community. And we knew that if you wanted to create social change, that you couldn't just have a blog. All this technology, it's just tools, right? You need people to make change, and we needed local, on-the-ground leadership. We didn't even try to pretend that we knew how to solve street harassment in India or in the Bahamas. We contacted people in those communities who did know how to solve it and worked with them. Today, we've trained 7 young activists, 400 of them, actually, in 79 cities in 26 countries in 14 different languages, including in the Bahamas, and Alicia is here with us tonight from Hollaback, Bahamas. We've worked with folks to give us our platform, our app, our best practices, and we've worked with them to localize the movement in their communities. All right, so a really big part of our work at Hollaback is helping to understand the phenomenon of street harassment. Internationally, studies show that anywhere between 60 and 99% of women experience street harassment at some point during their lives. But we want to see what's going on here. So whip out your handy cell phones, and let's see what's happening right here, right now, today. First question. Has anyone ever stared at you or gestured towards you in an offensive or uncomfortable way? So we're not talking about people thinking, oh yeah, like I really like that shirt on you. We're talking about people who are leering at you with the intent of making you feel uncomfortable, and they're successful, right? They make you feel uncomfortable. They make you feel like you have to leave the seat that you're sitting in or the place that you are in order to feel safe. So the answers are no, once, more than once, and often. So let's see the results. So what we see right here is that among the people in this room, the men and women in this room, that we already see about almost all of you, except, let's see if I can do some math, except for 87% of you, approximately, have experienced what I'm talking about non-verbally, anyway, at least at some point during your life. And that many of you have experienced it more than once or often. So we know that this is a problem, right? These nonverbal gestures, I won't demonstrate them, the leering, right? All that uncomfortable stuff. Next question. Has anyone verbally harassed you in public? So here we're talking about words, people saying things to you about your body, about the way that you look. Maybe they're telling you that you're gay, making racist comments to you, asking you if you're a girl or a boy, any of those types of verbal comments. And the sort of answers are no, once, more than once, and often. And let's see those results. So again, almost all of you have experienced this at some point in your life, and for many of you, it's more than once or often. Let's ask another question, right? So street harassment also includes following and stalking. So following is, you know, if you're walking down the street and there's a car sort of slowly creeping beside you, staring at you as you're walking, or maybe you show up somewhere and you see that same creepy person there again, even though they were there yesterday and the day before, and they're staring at you and making you feel uncomfortable. Or maybe you're just walking down the street and no matter which way you turn, you notice that there's somebody behind you who's following you, right? Let's see, among people in this room, how many people have been followed or stalked? And we're looking at no, once, more than once, and often. And let's see those results. We got a tiny graph this time. Oh, here we go. Okay, so we see, again, that many, many people in this room have experienced this at some point during their lives. One last question I want to know about your experience, and that's related to, have you ever been groped? So groping is a form of sexual assault. What it means is that somebody is grabbing your private parts, so it could be your butt or your crotch or your breast, and usually it's happening in public space over your clothes, although certainly it can happen under your clothes and in private space as well. So let's look, have folks in this room been groped ever? And again, no, once, more than once, and often. And let's see those results. I mean, you look at this, right? This is over half of the people in this room have been sexually assaulted. And this is a random sample of people. You guys didn't come here today just because, you know, you came to hear me speak. You came here for other reasons than that. You came here to be part of a global movement of people trying to change the world. And yet when we look at this, we see over half of you have been sexually assaulted. We see almost all of you have been harassed at some point during your lives, right? We're watching this huge, huge problem, and yet the media is obsessed with, things that aren't this huge, things that aren't this big. They're obsessed with swine flu, right, and Ebola, and things that are surely important, but that aren't impacting over 50% of people in this room. And so I think that this is just, you look at this, and every time it happens, and I want to say that you guys aren't weird. Don't think that you're weird, that just randomly congregated a bunch of people who've experienced this here in this room. This happens everywhere I go, and every single time it pisses me off. So, 2 more questions just about how this impacts your life. The first one, have you ever dressed differently in hopes of avoiding harassment? The answers are no, once, more than once, and often. So this could include, maybe you're going to a party and you don't wear your heels. You put them in your bag, right? And you wear flats to the party because you're scared that if you wear heels, you'll be harassed. Or maybe you're, you really want to wear that sparkly short skirt, but you're worried that you'll be harassed, that people will say things, that you'll just be too noticeable, right? So dressing differently, let's look at those results. So about half of you have dressed differently in hopes of avoiding harassment. And the last one, have you ever not wanted to go to school or work for fear of harassment, right? Is it interrupting the way that you live your life? No, once, more than once, and often. All right, let's see those results. Okay, so about a quarter of you, this has happened to. So this is kind of bananas, right? And this is just what the people in this room have experienced. On our site, we've received stories from girls as young as 7. And we've learned that young people, people of color, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender folks are most at risk. Last year, in a study of 93,000 LGBTQ, that's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer individuals across Europe, found that half of them avoid public spaces for fear of being harassed. And besides all these numbers and demographics, there's this deep effect that street harassment has. It can lead to feelings of fear and shame and helplessness. It can cause anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. People can change jobs, leave their homes, even just move to feel safe, right? And in New Delhi and Old Delhi, India, 95% of women say that their mobility is actually restricted for fear of public harassment. And that impact can be long-lasting. Studies have shown that sexual harassment can cause depression later in life. Street harassment also escalates into violence. It's on a spectrum of gender-based violence, but it can escalate as well. So what starts off as a comment can become very violent quickly. So in Washington, D.C., here in the United States, a woman was actually shot in the foot after refusing to respond to her harasser. In New York City, a pregnant woman was run over by a car and killed as a result of being harassed and refusing to respond. Despite all this evidence, the evidence here in this room, the studies, right, there's this powerful misconception that street harassment isn't a problem or it doesn't impact society. And I've actually, even in my life, been denied funding from a major social change organization that I will not name here today, but we can all scorn them in our minds, who said that street harassment wasn't a, quote, big enough problem. Even though earlier that year, in 2010, when that happened, 14 girls in India had committed suicide within a 4-month time frame as a result of the street harassment they faced on the streets. So, street harassment, obviously, not a new problem, right? It has probably existed since the advent of streets. And resistance to it, not new either. In the 1920s, there were these really cute girls who ran this thing called the Anti-Flirt Club, which is a terrible name for an organization because flirting is clearly awesome, but what they were trying to do is end street harassment. And it was brought into the limelight again in the 1970s by the feminist movement. But what is new for this generation is the solution. So technology has given us an unprecedented opportunity to shine a light in the dark corners of this long-standing social problem. Never before have we been able to document street harassment on the go with our free iPhone and Droid app. And never before have our stories mattered so much. With mobile apps, blogs, and social media, stories are amplified to thousands within minutes, allowing us to build movements faster than ever before. And last year, we have these great free iPhone and Android apps that you should totally download right now as we're sitting here. And last year, we relaunched them so that in New York City specifically, although they work here and everywhere else in the world as well, when you share your story of harassment to Hollaback, you can also opt in to sharing it to the council member in the district in which you were harassed. So this actually makes New York City the first city in the world to document street harassment in real time. And we're using that data to better target the problem and garner support for education and awareness campaigns. We want to see this problem prevented, not the people who are doing it tar and feathered and locked away. But the apps are only one piece of this puzzle. In the age of social media, where everyone has followers, followers become the new leaders. So at Hollaback, we've trained over 400 leaders around the world, most of whom we've never met in person anyway, and all of whom are leading the way. But we're not the only ones making change. Right now, in the course of history, you're witnessing a movement so powerful that it is changing the way we walk down the street. In Egypt, groups are coming together, banding together to go into crowded areas and literally remove women from situations in which they're surrounded by men. In India, thousands took to the streets after the brutal gang rape and murder in Delhi. And together, we have built a global movement. We may not all agree on how to end street harassment, but we all agree that it must end. And what we found with our work at Hollaback is that the people with the least amount of access to power are the people who are most attracted to this movement to end street harassment and this model of movement building. Our site leaders are 44% lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. They are 90% under the age of 30. A quarter have disabilities. And through their leadership, we are making amazing strides. Sites in Istanbul, Poland, and Croatia have completed groundbreaking research on street harassment. The Scottish Parliament has issued a motion in support of Hollaback Edinburgh for their efforts. And in Hollaback Philly, they got these amazing anti-street harassment ads. And we just heard that they're also moving to Boston as well. These examples are just a few of the hundreds of stories from volunteers creating change around the globe. You see, activism, it's not just, online activism isn't just about everyone going around and signing a petition and signing up for an email list and then ignoring all the emails, right? It's about bringing solutions to issues that used to be hopeless. It's about giving voice to people who used to be silenced. And it's a reminder that sexual violence is not something that happens to those people over there. It's something that happens to all of us. Street harassment shouldn't be a fact of life. It shouldn't be the cost of being a woman, or being gay, or being transgender, or being a person of color. We deserve to ride the train without fear of being groped. We deserve to walk down the street without wearing a frickin' jacket with 110 volts of electricity. We deserve the simple right to be who we are when we walk down the street. And I want to live in a world where I can simply say good morning to a stranger on the street without worrying about what the repercussions are. We may not be able to end street harassment today, but I want to live in a world where it's really, really, really rare, where it's frowned upon, not shrugged at. So many others have courageously stepped up and changed the course of history. So many others who have come before us. So let's continue that trend. It begins with telling our stories. We can transform our experiences of street harassment from something isolating and silencing to something that's shareable and empowering. Right here, today, we have the power to change the culture by changing the narrative. So share your story. Let's tell them what's wrong so they can see what's possible and let's make what's possible a reality. Thank you.